to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, and tonight you are invited to settle gently into a quiet tale of a cobblestone bed and breakfast, tucked at the edge of an old village where a soft drizzle falls, and every room seems to remember the art of rest. Let your body become heavy in the kindest way. Let the places that have worked so hard today begin to loosen. Your shoulders may soften, your jaw may unclench, and your hands may rest without needing to hold anything at all. There is nothing to solve here, nothing to hurry toward. Only the slow sound of rain, the hush of an evening lane, and the warm promise of lamplight behind rain-speckled windows. Imagine the air cool and clean, washed silver by a gentle drizzle. It gathers in tiny pearls along the edges of leaves, darkens the old stone walls, and makes the cobblestones shine as though the village street has been polished for your arrival. Somewhere nearby a kettle hums. Somewhere beyond that, a small bell moves in the breeze, giving one soft note and then becoming quiet again. Take a slow breath in, as if breathing in the scent of wet earth, lavender soap, and wood smoke. And breathe out, as if setting down the whole day. Again, breathe in the rain-washed stillness, and breathe out, letting your thoughts drift farther away, like fallen petals carried along a quiet gutter. The story begins on a lane so old that no one in the village could remember when the stones were first laid. They curved gently between leaning cottages and low garden walls, past mossy wells and sleepy window boxes, until they arrived at a small inn with a blue door and a sign painted in fading gold. The sign swung lightly in the drizzle, and on it was written, "The Cobblestone Bed and Breakfast." It was called Cobblestone not only because of the lane outside, but because every part of the place seemed to have grown from the patient, rounded stones beneath it. The front steps were cobbled, the garden paths were cobbled, and even the hearth in the sitting room was framed with smooth gray stones, each one different, each one holding a small shine when the firelight touched it. On a quiet evening in early autumn, when the clouds had lowered like soft wool over the village roofs, a traveler arrived at the inn. Her name was Elowyn, though by the time the rain had soaked the hem of her coat and dimmed the world into watercolor, even her name felt like something she could set down for a while. She had walked from the coach stop beyond the bridge, following the narrow lane beneath dripping branches, her satchel resting against her hip, her boots making gentle sounds on the wet stones. The village was not large. It seemed to have folded itself into the valley for warmth, with its slate roofs, crooked chimneys, and little panes of glass glowing amber against the blue evening. Curtains were drawn, suppers were beginning, and the scent of baking bread drifted from one house, then disappeared, then returned again, with the turn of the wind, Elowen stopped beneath the swinging sign of the Cobblestone Bed and Breakfast and looked up. Rain tapped softly on the brim of her hat. A climbing rose, mostly green now, trembled beside the door, holding the last few pale blossoms of the season. Their petals were beaded with water, and one petal had fallen onto the top step, where it lay like a tiny shell. Before Elowen could knock, the blue door opened. A woman stood there with a lantern in one hand and a knitted shawl around her shoulders. Her hair was silver, braided loosely over one shoulder, and her face carried the calm expression of someone who had spent many years listening to rain. "Come in, my dear," she said, in a voice as warm as toast. "The drizzle has been expecting you." Elowen smiled, though she was too tired to ask what that meant. She stepped inside, and the inn gathered around her like a blanket. The entryway smelled of beeswax, rosemary, old wood, and something sweet cooling in the kitchen. A row of brass hooks held raincoats and scarves. A grandfather clock ticked with a slow, steady heartbeat. On a small table near the stairs, a porcelain bowl held polished stones, each one gray or green or honey brown, smooth from years of being touched by passing hands. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Wren, keeper of the inn, baker of apple cakes, mender of socks, and, as she added with a small smile, occasional negotiator with stubborn teapots. Elowen's coat was hung near the hearth. Her satchel was carried upstairs, and her wet boots were placed on a warming mat made of woven rushes. Mrs. Wren gave her a pair of soft slippers the color of oatmeal and led her into the sitting room. There, a fire burned in a wide stone hearth. Not a blazing fire, but a gentle one, with logs glowing red at their centers, and flames turning lazily, as if they too had no wish to rush. Shelves of books lined one wall. A round table held a half-finished puzzle showing a moonlit orchard. Two deep chairs faced the window, where the drizzle tapped and trailed down the glass in slow, wandering lines. A gray cat slept on a cushion near the fire, curled so tightly that he looked like a question the room had chosen not to answer. "This is Marmalade," said Mrs. Wren, though the cat was not orange. He was orange in spirit when he arrived, and one must respect a cat's inner color. Marmalade opened one eye, considered Elowen, and closed it again. Mrs. Wren brought tea in a brown pot with painted violets on its sides. Beside it came a slice of warm apple cake, dense with cinnamon and tender fruit, and a small dish of butter so pale it was almost white. Elowen sat by the fire, took the cup between her hands, and felt the warmth move slowly through her fingers. Outside, the rain continued. It was not a storm. It made no demands. It simply fell, thread by silver thread, softening roof and road, garden and gate. It gathered in the low places between the cobbles, where lamplight shimmered in little puddles. Now and then a villager passed by the window under an umbrella, their shape blurred by water, their footsteps quiet and unhurried. Mrs. Wren sat nearby with a basket of mending, her needle moving in and out of a blue wool sock. She did not chatter, and that was one of the most comforting things about her. She allowed silence to settle. She allowed the fire to speak in faint crackles. She allowed the rain to fill the spaces between thoughts. After a while, Elowen felt the day loosening its hold. She had been traveling for many weeks through towns that were too loud, stations that were too crowded, and roads that seemed always to be leading her onward before she was ready. She had come to the village with no particular plan except to rest. A friend had once told her that the Cobblestone Bed and Breakfast was the kind of place where tired people remembered how to breathe. At first, Elowen had thought that was simply a pretty phrase, but now, sitting in the fire-lit room while the rain stroked the windows, she began to understand. Her breathing slowed, her eyes followed the dim gold pulse of the flames. Her fingers loosened around the teacup. Mrs. Wren glanced up from her mending. "The house likes drizzle best," she said quietly. "It settles the beams. It wakes the stones. It reminds the pillows what they are for." Elowen smiled sleepily. "Do pillows forget?" "Everything forgets now and then," said Mrs. Wren. "That is why rain is useful." When the tea was finished and the apple cake had left only a few crumbs on the plate, Mrs. Wren offered to show Elowen to her room. They climbed the stairs slowly. Each step gave a soft sigh underfoot, not unpleasant, but companionable, as though the staircase had known many travelers and wished each one good rest. The hallway above was narrow and papered in a faded pattern of ferns. Along the wall hung little paintings of the village in different weather. Snow on the church roof, summer light on the mill stream, fog over the sheep fields, and in one frame, the very inn itself beneath a silver rain. Elowen's room was at the end of the hall. Mrs. Wren opened the door and the lamplight went in before them. It was a small room under the eaves with a sloping ceiling and a window that looked out over the back garden. The bed stood against the far wall, covered in a quilt of soft squares, blue and cream and gentle gray. A little writing desk sat near the window, and on it was a jar of dried lavender, a candle, and a smooth stone like those in the bowl downstairs. The rain sounded different here. It whispered over the roof tiles, trickled through the gutter, and tapped faintly against the window, each sound small enough to be soothing. Mrs. Wren set Elowen's satchel on a wooden stand. "There are extra blankets in the chest. The washroom is just across the hall. If you hear anything in the night, it will most likely be the pipes, the rain, or Marmalade pretending not to want company." Elowen thanked her. At the door, Mrs. Wren paused. "Breakfast is whenever you wake, not before, not after, whenever you do." Then she smiled and left Elowen in the quiet room. For a little while, Elowen stood at the window, looking down into the garden. The back garden was enclosed by a low stone wall, beyond which lay a meadow fading into mist. A pear tree leaned over the path. Raindrops slipped from its leaves and landed among the herbs below. The cobbled path curved past sleeping flower beds, a covered well, and a small bench beneath an arbor. At the far end of the garden, half hidden by ivy, was a round gate set into the wall. The gate was painted the same blue as the front door. Alowan wondered where it led. Perhaps to the meadow, perhaps to another lane, perhaps nowhere in particular, which seemed just as likely in a place like this. She changed into her night clothes, washed her face in warm water from a blue pitcher, and tucked herself beneath the quilt. The sheets were cool at first, then warmed around her. The pillow held the faint scent of lavender. The room was dim and kind. As she lay there, the rain tapped out its patient rhythm. The village clock sounded faintly through the drizzle, each bell softened by distance. Alowan listened, not counting, only receiving the sound as it moved through the wet air and faded into the eaves. She slept deeply. And in the deep part of night, when the mind releases the shape of the day and begins wandering among gentler things, Alowan dreamed of cobblestones. She dreamed they were not merely stones, but small moons, each one holding a little borrowed light. They formed a path beneath her feet, dry and silver, though the rain continued to fall all around. The path led through the blue gate at the end of the garden, which stood open now, though she could not remember opening it. Beyond the gate, the meadow was full of mist. Not frightening mist, soft mist, the sort that hid the edges of things so the world could rest from being too sharply seen. Alowan walked along the cobbled path. She wore her nightdress and the oatmeal slippers Mrs. Wren had given her, yet she was not cold. The drizzle fell without wetting her. It sparkled in the air like fine glass threads, and every drop gave a tiny sound as it touched leaf or stone or blade of grass. Ahead, a lantern glowed. Beside it stood Marmalade, the gray cat, looking deeply orange in spirit and entirely unsurprised. He turned and padded down the path. Alowan followed. The path led over a small bridge that crossed a stream she had not seen from her window. The stream moved slowly between ferny banks, carrying pear leaves and star-shaped bits of reflected sky. On the other side of the bridge stood a row of little cottages, far smaller than any in the village. Their windows shone warmly, and their chimneys gave off curls of blue smoke that smelled faintly of vanilla. Marmalade stopped before the smallest cottage and touched the door with one paw. It opened just enough for a golden line of light to fall across the wet stone. Inside, someone was humming. Alowan bent to look, but before she could see who lived there, the scene changed in the effortless way of dreams, and she found herself walking again, farther down the path, past hedges jeweled with rain and sleepy fields, where white sheep rested like tucked away clouds. The drizzle became music. It was almost too delicate to hear. Each drop struck a different note. Roof tiles gave low tones, leaves gave high ones, puddles answered in silver ripples. The whole night was playing itself very softly, and Alowan felt that if she breathed too loudly she might miss it. Marmalade led her to a hill above the village. From there, she could see the Cobblestone Bed and Breakfast below, warm windowed and peaceful in the rain. The sign swung gently. The garden gleamed. Smoke rose from the chimney and flattened under the low clouds before drifting away. Beside the hill stood an old stone arch with no wall attached to it. Ferns grew from its cracks, and rain slid over its top. Through the arch, Elowen could see not the other side of the hill, but a room. It was a room made almost entirely of dusk. There were shelves of folded blankets, jars of moonlight, bowls of dried chamomile, and a long wooden counter polished smooth by many hands. Behind the counter stood Mrs. Wren, younger and older all at once, wearing the same shawl and holding the same lantern. "Every inn has a heart," she said, as if continuing a conversation they had begun years ago. "But not every traveler sees it." Elowen stepped through the arch. The air in the dusk room was warm and sweet. It smelled of rain, wool, and the first page of an old book. Along one wall were many little drawers, each labeled in careful handwriting. One said, "Forgotten Lullabies." Another said, "Lost Buttons." Another said, "Sighs saved for later." Mrs. Wren opened a drawer and took out a small silver thimble. "This belongs to Mrs. Alder from the bakery," she said. "She lost it during a summer thunderstorm and has been using the wrong one ever since. The house found it between 2 raindrops." Elowen nodded because in the dream this made perfect sense. Marmalade leapt onto the counter and sat with his tail curled around his paws. Mrs. Wren placed the thimble into a little envelope. Then she chose something from another drawer and handed it to Elowen. It was a key, no larger than a leaf stem, made of dark blue metal. "For the room you need, when you need it," said Mrs. Wren. "What room is that?" asked Elowen. "The quiet one." Then the dusk room dissolved, and Elowen was back in her bed beneath the eaves. Morning came without hurry. It did not burst through the window, but grew gradually behind the clouds, turning the room from charcoal to pearl. Rain still fell softer now, a fine drizzle that blurred the garden into tender shapes. Elowen woke warm beneath the quilt, with the dream lingering like a taste of honey. For a while she did not move. The inn was quiet except for the small sounds of morning, pipes knocking somewhere far away, a door closing gently, dishes being set out in the kitchen below. From the hallway came a faint padding, then a pause, then the unmistakable little scratch of a cat considering whether to be invited. Elowen opened the door. Marmalade entered at once and walked in a circle around the room as though inspecting it for proper sleep. Apparently satisfied, he jumped onto the window seat and looked out at the rain. After dressing, Elowen went downstairs. The breakfast room was bright with lamplight despite the gray morning. Its windows faced the lane, where raindrops patterned the glass. 3 small tables were set with blue plates, folded napkins, and tiny jars of jam. A vase held late marigolds, their orange heads glowing warmly against the weather. Mrs. Wren brought tea, porridge with cream, stewed plums, and thick slices of bread still warm from the oven. There was butter, honey, and a little dish of salt. Alowan ate slowly. Each spoonful seemed to settle her more deeply into the chair, into the room, into the day. The porridge was warm and mild. The plums were dark and sweet. The bread gave off a soft steam when she broke it open. At the next table sat an elderly man in a brown coat, reading a newspaper whose pages he turned with ceremonial care. He nodded to Layla but did not speak. Near the window, a young woman stitched a border of tiny blue flowers onto a handkerchief, looking up now and then at the rain as if borrowing its rhythm for her needle. No one was in a hurry. After breakfast, Layla asked Mrs. Wren where the blue gate in the garden led. Mrs. Wren looked at her for a moment, then smiled, as though Layla had asked the right sort of question. "To the meadow most days," she said. "To other places now and then, but only when the weather is listening." Layla accepted this because the drizzle had made the world feel possible in a quiet way. She spent the morning in the sitting room. The elderly man finished his newspaper and began a book about birds. The young woman stitched. Marmalade moved from cushion to rug to windowsill, following warmth the way a sailor follows stars. Layla chose a book from the shelf, but mostly she watched the rain. It silvered the lane, it softened the outlines of passing carts. It gathered on the sill until a drop became heavy enough to slip downward, leaving a clear trail behind it. Across the street, a shopkeeper placed a basket of apples under the awning and polished each one with a cloth, though they would soon be misted again. Near midday, the rain lessened to a breath. Layla borrowed a shawl from the peg by the door and stepped into the garden. The air smelled green and old and newly washed. Her slippers had been replaced by sturdy shoes, but she walked carefully along the cobbled path, enjoying the gentle unevenness beneath her feet. The pear tree dripped slowly. The herb beds were dark with wet soil. Rosemary, thyme, and mint released their scents when the hem of her skirt brushed them. A robin hopped along the wall, its chest bright as a coal, and shook rain from its wings. At the far end of the garden, the blue gate waited. By daylight, it seemed ordinary enough. Weathered wood, iron latch, ivy around the frame. Through its narrow gaps, she could see the meadow beyond, pale and damp, with sheep grazing near the misty fence line. Layla lifted the latch. The gate opened without a sound. She stepped through. The meadow was quiet, the grass jeweled with rain. A narrow path led toward a cluster of hazel trees. Beyond them, the land dipped toward the stream she had dreamed of in the night. It was real, or real enough, moving slowly under the little bridge carrying leaves on its back. Layla stood on the bridge and listened. Water over stone, drizzle on leaves, a distant bell from the village, the low murmur of sheep, her own breath, calmer than it had been in a long time. A small cottage stood beyond the stream, though it was not as tiny as in her dream. Its windows were dark, its chimney cold. and its door painted green. No golden light slipped beneath it. No humming came from inside. Still, there was a feeling about it, as if the dream had left a soft fingerprint there. On the bridge railing lay a silver thimble. Elowen picked it up. It was very small, bright despite the gray day, and etched with a pattern of wheat. She remembered the drawer, the envelope, Mrs. Alder from the bakery. When she returned to the inn, Mrs. Wren was in the kitchen rolling pastry. Flour dusted her sleeves. Apples waited in a bowl beside her, peeled in long, curling ribbons. Elowen placed the thimble on the table. Mrs. Wren glanced at it and chuckled softly. Ah, the rain is punctual after all. That afternoon, Elowen took the thimble to the bakery. Mrs. Alder, a round woman with kind eyes and flour on one cheek, nearly cried when she saw it. She said she had lost the thimble in a summer storm many years ago and had never found another that fit properly. She insisted Elowen take a currant bun in thanks, wrapped in brown paper and still warm. Elowen carried it back through the drizzle, feeling strangely light. The village had become more familiar now. She noticed the small things. The brass fox knocker on the green door, the row of clay pots catching rain beneath a windowsill, the carved wooden owl above the apothecary, the way every puddle seemed to hold a different piece of sky. When she returned to the inn, the sitting room had changed only in warmth. The fire had been fed. The lamps had been lit. A faint scent of apple pastry filled the air. Elowen sat at the puzzle table and placed one piece into the moonlit orchard, then another. The young woman with the embroidery joined her, introducing herself as Clara. The elderly man, whose name was Mr. Penrose, contributed a corner piece with great satisfaction. Mrs. Wren passed through now and then, carrying trays, adjusting lamps, and saying nothing that needed answering. The day folded itself inward. Rain strengthened again toward evening, ticking against the windows with renewed purpose. Shadows gathered in the corners. The firelight became richer. Supper was served in bowls, vegetable stew with barley, parsley dumplings, and roasted carrots, glazed with a little honey. There was cider warmed with cloves, and for dessert, apple tart with a crisp, sugared edge. Conversation drifted gently, never rising too high. Mr. Penrose spoke of birds that could sleep while flying. Clara described the blue thread she was using and how it reminded her of the hour before dawn. Mrs. Wren told them that the inn had once hosted a traveling harpist who played only during rainfall, because she believed every song needed a veil. After supper, the harpist's name seemed to linger in the room, though no one could remember it. Later, as Elowen climbed the stairs to her room, she felt for a moment that she heard harp strings, just a few notes, faint and silver, woven into the drizzle. She paused on the landing, listening. There it was again. A delicate music, not from downstairs, not from outside, but somehow from the walls themselves. The old beams seemed to hum with it. The fern-patterned wallpaper appeared softer in the lamplight. The paintings of village weather watched quietly from their frames. Elowen followed the sound to the end of the hallway, past her own door, to a narrower door she had not noticed before. It was painted blue. In the keyhole glimmered a dark blue light. Elowen reached into her pocket without knowing why. Her fingers closed around something small and cool. The key from the dream. She held it up. It was real enough to catch the lamplight. Delicate, blue as evening, no larger than a leaf stem. She placed it in the lock. The door opened. Inside was a quiet room. It was not grand. It held no treasure, no secret throne, no mirror showing faraway lands. It was simply the quietest room Elowen had ever known. The floor was covered in a thick wool rug. The walls were lined with shelves of folded blankets. A single chair stood by a small hearth where blue flames burned without heat. Rain moved down the window, though the room seemed to have no outside wall. On a table beside the chair stood a cup of tea, already poured. Elowen entered and sat down. The silence was not empty. It was full, but full of soft things, full of permission, full of all the words she had not wanted to say and no longer needed to, full of the comfort that comes when a place asks nothing from you, not even a smile. She drank the tea. It tasted of chamomile, pear, and something like starlight, cooled in a spoon. As she sat there, she thought of all the roads she had taken, all the rooms where she had slept lightly, all the mornings when she had woken before she was ready. She thought of how tiredness can gather not only in the body but in the corners of the mind, where it waits to be noticed. The quiet room noticed. The rain noticed. The chair held her kindly. After a while, the blue flames lowered. The teacup emptied itself of warmth. Elowen's eyes grew heavy, and she might have slept there, but Marmalade appeared at the door with an expression of firm hospitality. He gave one small sound. Elowen rose and followed him back to her room. The blue door closed behind her with a hush. In the morning, she found no door at the end of the hallway, only the fern wallpaper, a small painting of the inn in snow, and Marmalade washing one paw, as if he knew absolutely nothing about anything. Elowen did not ask Mrs. Wren about the quiet room. Some things she felt did not need explaining. Some things were better carried like a warm stone in the pocket, touched now and then for comfort. The drizzle continued for another day, then another, each day softer than the last. Elowen stayed at the inn, waking when she woke, eating when breakfast found her, walking when the rain became mist, reading when the clouds lowered again. She helped Clara finish the blue flowers on the handkerchief. She listened to Mr. Penrose identify birds by their calls from the sitting room window. She delivered the currant bun's empty wrapping back to Mrs. Alder and came away with a loaf of seed bread. She learned which stair sighed the loudest and which chair near the fire was best in the afternoon. Each night, she slept more deeply. Sometimes she dreamed of the dusk room and its little drawers. Sometimes she dreamed of the stream carrying leaves beneath the bridge. Once she dreamed the entire inn was afloat on a dark blue sea. its windows glowing, its chimney smoking, its cobbled steps trailing behind it like a tail of stones. No one was alarmed. Mrs. Wren simply served tea on the deck, while Marmalade watched moonfish passing below. But most nights, Aloan did not remember dreaming at all. She only sank down through rain sound, down through lavender and clean sheets, down through warmth, down into the old, patient rest her body had been waiting for. At last there came a morning when the drizzle thinned into mist, and the mist lifted into a pale, clear sky. Sunlight touched the wet roofs. The cobblestones glittered. Every leaf in the garden held a bead of light. Aloan stood at the window of her room and felt no sadness about leaving. The inn had not asked her to stay. It had only taught her how to rest, and that was something she could take with her. Not in her satchel, though Mrs. Wren packed her bread and cheese for the road. Not in her pockets, though the smooth stone from the writing desk somehow found its way into one. She would carry it in her breathing, in the way she noticed rain, in the way she allowed silence to be a room she could enter whenever she needed. Downstairs, Mrs. Wren was waiting by the blue door. Marmalade sat on the bottom step, gray and dignified, orange in spirit as ever. Mr. Penrose lifted his hat from the breakfast room. Clara waved the finished handkerchief, its blue flowers neat and bright. From the kitchen came the scent of something baking for travelers who had not yet arrived. Mrs. Wren handed Aloan her coat. "The road will be damp near the bridge," she said, "but kinder after that." Aloan thanked her for everything. Mrs. Wren smiled. Rest is not a thing to thank. It is a thing to remember. Outside the village shone. The lane curved away between the cottages, each cobblestone bright from rain and morning light. Aloan walked slowly, not because she was tired, but because she knew now that there was no need to hurry. Behind her the inn stood, warm and still, the blue door closing softly, the sign moving once in the clean air. And when she reached the bridge beyond the village, she paused. The stream below carried a pear leaf, turning gently as it went. The sky above was pale and wide. Somewhere far behind her, or perhaps only inside her memory, a kettle began to hum. Aloan breathed in and breathed out. Then she continued on, carrying the quiet with her. Now the story softens. The rain has passed into memory, but its calm remains. The cobblestones are still damp and shining. The little inn is warm behind its windows. The fire is low, the quilt is smooth, the pillow is cool and waiting. There is no need to follow the road any farther. Let Aloan walk on through the peaceful morning, and let yourself remain at the inn beneath the eaves, where the room is dim, and the rain can be remembered as gently as a lullaby. The bed holds you. The blankets settle. The world grows quiet at the edges. A blue door closes somewhere in a dream. A cat curls near the hearth. A kettle sings, then stills. And all through the old village, rest moves softly from roof to roof, from window to window, from breath to breath. Sleep can come now. There is nothing more to carry, nothing more to mend, only warmth, only quiet, only the soft, familiar hush of a place that knows how to keep you safe until morning. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.